Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Mr. English Lab, the place where your English grows, one story at a time. Today, the moment everything changes. Welcome to Mr. English Lab. Today, I want to take you into a story. A simple story. A quiet story. But a story that holds a powerful lesson about life, about growth, and about something many people never think about. Something called proactivity. Now, I know this word may sound big or maybe unusual, but don't worry. By the end of this long, slow, friendly lesson, you will not only understand this word, you will feel it. You will hear it in your mind, and you will see it in your daily life. So take a deep breath, relax your shoulders, and let me tell you a story that begins with a question. A quiet question. A question that changed everything for one young man. A question that might change something for you too. It was a warm morning in early spring, and the sun was just waking up. Soft light entered through the windows of a small room, a room where a young man named Daniel sat at a wooden desk. Daniel was 23 years old. He was not rich. He was not famous. He was not special in the way the world usually describes special. He was simply a young person trying to find his place in the world. And like many young people, Daniel felt lost. He felt like life was happening to him, not with him. He felt like he was floating through days without direction. And maybe you have felt something like that too. On this morning, Daniel was preparing for a long day of work. He worked in a small electronics store in his town. He sold headphones, chargers, small gadgets, and sometimes mobile phones. The job was not bad, but it was not exciting either. Some days he felt bored. Some days he felt tired. Some days he felt invisible. But today, something was different. Not because of the job, not because of the weather, and not because of something outside him. No, something felt different because of a thought. A quiet thought that had been growing inside him for weeks. As he sat at his desk, he looked at a small notebook. Inside this notebook were dreams. Real dreams. His dreams. Dreams he had written down months ago, dreams he had slowly forgotten. He opened to the first page. At the top, it said, "Things I want to do before I turn 30. Daniel smiled a little, but the smile did not last long. Because when he looked at the list, he felt something sharp inside him. A kind of pain. A kind of disappointment. None of the things on the list had happened yet. There were simple dreams like learn photography and start my own small business. There were bigger dreams like travel to another country and save money for the future. But the biggest dream, the dream that made his heart beat faster every time he imagined it, was written in bold letters, "Become the kind of person I am proud of." That line, that one sentence, felt heavy. And Daniel asked himself a question. A small question, but a powerful question. He whispered it out loud. Why am I not moving forward? Have you ever asked yourself a question like that? A question that feels simple but also deep? A question that makes you look at your life in a new way? Daniel closed the notebook and leaned back in his chair. He felt frustrated. He felt stuck. He felt like something was missing, and he didn't know what it was yet. But that morning, something happened. Something small. Something quiet. Something that would open the door to a new kind of life. Daniel picked up his phone and opened a message from his friend Lucas. Lucas was the opposite of Daniel. He was always energetic. Always full of ideas. Always doing something new. But in this message, Lucas had written something unusual. Something simple, but strong. The message said, "Hey man, I know you've been feeling down. Just remember this, life doesn't get better by chance. It gets better by change." Daniel read the message once. Then twice. Then 3 times. Life doesn't get better by chance. It gets better by change. The words stayed in his mind like an echo, like a quiet but steady heartbeat. He put the phone down and closed his eyes. And then, something shifted inside him. Not a big explosion. Not a dramatic moment. Just a shift. A small movement, like the first step of a long walk. And that shift was the beginning of understanding what proactivity means. Suddenly, Daniel remembered something from a book he had read long ago. A simple idea. There are two kinds of people in the world. People who wait. And people who act. People who react to life. And people who respond with intention. People who say, I can't. And people who say, I will try. But Daniel did not feel like one of the strong people. He felt like someone who waited. Someone who reacted. Someone who let life happen. And that realization hurt. But it also opened his eyes. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside. The world looked normal. Cars passed by. People walked to work. Birds moved across the sky. Nothing looked dramatic. But inside him, something felt different. He whispered another question. What if I could change my life just by changing my choices? And that, my friend listening today, is the first step to understanding proactivity. Because proactivity is not about being perfect. It's not about always knowing what to do. It's not about being strong all the time. Proactivity simply means you choose. You choose how you speak. You choose how you act. You choose how you respond. You choose what kind of person you want to be. Even when life is difficult. Even when things are uncertain. Even when you feel small. Daniel continued looking out the window as the morning light grew brighter. He took a slow breath. And then he made a very simple decision, a decision that would start everything. He decided to stop blaming everything around him. He decided to stop saying, maybe tomorrow. He decided to stop waiting for someone to save him or for life to magically become easier. He decided to take one small action that day. Not 10 actions. Not 100 actions. Just one small step. One intentional step. And that decision, that one moment, was the true beginning of his journey. He sat down again and opened the notebook. Instead of feeling sad about the things he hadn't done, he wrote a new sentence at the bottom of the page. Today, I will do one thing that moves me forward. He smiled when he wrote it. Not because he knew what would happen. Not because he felt confident. But because he felt alive. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was participating in his own life. And that is the beauty of proactivity. It starts small. It starts inside you. It starts when you stop asking, why is life like this, and begin asking, what can I do right now? After writing the new sentence, Daniel looked at the clock. It was almost time to leave for work. Normally, this would be the moment when he rushed, stressed, annoyed, or late. But today, he moved slowly. He felt calm. He felt present. He felt like this was the beginning of something new. He packed his bag, took his jacket, and opened the door. As he stepped outside, the air felt fresher than usual. The street looked brighter. The morning felt more alive. And Daniel realized something. The world had not changed. He had changed. His eyes were seeing everything differently because his mind had shifted. And when your mind changes, your whole world feels different. As he walked toward the bus stop, he heard children laughing in the distance. He noticed the flowers by the sidewalk. He noticed the smell of fresh air. These were things he always passed without noticing. But now he could feel them. Because proactivity awakens your awareness. It brings you back to the present moment. When Daniel arrived at the bus stop, he saw an old man sitting on the bench. The man looked tired. His clothes were a little worn, but his eyes were warm. Daniel usually ignored strangers. He usually kept his head down. But today, something changed. He decided to speak. Just a simple greeting. A small act. Good morning, he said gently. The old man looked up, smiled, and replied, Good morning, young man. And that was it. A moment of connection. A moment that would normally not happen. But today it did. Why? Because Daniel made a choice. A small choice. A proactive choice. He sat on the bus. The engine started. People around him looked the same as every other day, some sleepy, some frustrated, some lost in their own thoughts. But Daniel felt something new inside him. A quiet power. A soft energy. The energy of someone who is beginning to take responsibility for their life. As the bus moved through the streets, Daniel whispered another question to himself. If one small choice can change my morning, what could many small choices change in my life? He decided to take one small action that day. Not 10 actions. Not 100 actions. Just one small step. One intentional step. And that decision, that one moment, was the true beginning of his journey. He sat down again and opened the notebook. Instead of feeling sad about the things he hadn't done, he wrote a new sentence at the bottom of the page. Today, I will do one thing that moves me forward. He smiled when he wrote it. Not because he knew what would happen. Not because he felt confident. But because he felt alive. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was participating in his own life. And that is the beauty of proactivity. It starts small. It starts inside you. It starts when you stop asking, why is life like this, and begin asking, what can I do right now? After writing the new sentence, Daniel looked at the clock. It was almost time to leave for work. Normally, this would be the moment when he rushed, stressed, annoyed, or late. But today, he moved slowly. He felt calm. He felt present. He felt like this was the beginning of something new. He packed his bag, took his jacket, and opened the door. As he stepped outside, the air felt fresher than usual. The street looked brighter. The morning felt more alive. And Daniel realized something. The world had not changed. He had changed. His eyes were seeing everything differently because his mind had shifted. And when your mind changes, your whole world feels different. As he walked toward the bus stop, he heard children laughing in the distance. He noticed the flowers by the sidewalk. He noticed the smell of fresh air. These were things he always passed without noticing. But now he could feel them. Because proactivity awakens your awareness. It brings you back to the present moment. When Daniel arrived at the bus stop, he saw an old man sitting on the bench. The man looked tired. His clothes were a little worn, but his eyes were warm. Daniel usually ignored strangers. He usually kept his head down. But today, something changed. He decided to speak. Just a simple greeting. A small act. "Good morning," he said gently. The old man looked up, smiled, and replied, "Good morning, young man." And that was it. A moment of connection. A moment that would normally not happen. But today it did. Why? Because Daniel made a choice. A small choice. A proactive choice. He sat on the bus. The engine started. People around him looked the same as every other day, some sleepy, some frustrated, some lost in their own thoughts. But Daniel felt something new inside him. A quiet power. A soft energy. The energy of someone who is beginning to take responsibility for their life. As the bus moved through the streets, Daniel whispered another question to himself. If one small choice can change my morning, what could many small choices change in my life? And that question is the heart of proactivity. Proactivity is not one big decision. It is many small decisions. It is a practice. A mindset. A daily habit. It is the difference between sleeping through your life and waking up inside it. Daniel did not know what would happen next. He did not know how his choices would shape his life. He did not know that this journey would become difficult, surprising, emotional, and full of lessons. But he was ready. Ready to learn. Ready to grow. Ready to step into a new chapter of his life. And now, my friend listening to this story, you and I are going to walk with him. Step by step, moment by moment, choice by choice. Together, we will explore what proactivity really means, not through complicated words, but through experiences. So take another slow breath. Feel your mind relax. Feel your heart open. And prepare for the next part of this journey. Because in the next section, we will meet someone who will teach Daniel, and maybe teach you, a powerful lesson about the difference between reacting and responding. This is just the beginning. And the story is only going to get deeper. The two students. Daniel arrived at work just a little earlier than usual. The store lights were still off, and the sign on the front door said closed. Normally, he would stand outside, checking his phone, scrolling for no reason, waiting for his manager to arrive. But today, he didn't pick up his phone. Today, he stood quietly, breathing in the fresh morning air and looking at the reflections in the glass door. The street around him was waking up slowly, cars passing softly, shopkeepers lifting shutters, birds jumping from cable to cable. Inside the reflection, Daniel saw himself. Not the tired version he knew so well. Not the confused young man from the past few months. Instead, he saw someone at the beginning of a journey. Someone who wanted more from life. Someone who was ready to learn. A moment later, the store manager arrived. Her name was Clara. She was in her early 50s, calm, intelligent, and always walking as if she had a plan. She looked at Daniel with surprise. "You're early today," she said with a soft smile. Daniel smiled back. "Yeah, I just wanted to start the day right." Clara nodded, unlocked the door, and the two of them walked in. As they entered, the small bells above the door made a gentle sound, one that Daniel had never really noticed before. Inside the store, everything looked the same. Rows of gadgets, clean shelves, small signs showing prices, and boxes of new products waiting to be unpacked. But Daniel felt different standing in the same space. As he started arranging the new items, he noticed Clara watching him. Not in a strange way. In a thoughtful way. After a minute she said, "You know, Daniel, when I see you today, you remind me of two students I once taught." Daniel stopped and looked at her. "You were a teacher?" Clara nodded. "Yes. Long before I became a store manager. I taught at a small community school. And every year I met many students. But these two, I never forgot." Daniel was curious now. What happened? Clara leaned against one of the shelves, crossed her arms, and began to tell the story. "There were two boys in my class," she said. "Their names were Aaron and Miles. They were both the same age. They both came from similar families. They both had the same teachers. They learned from the same books. They sat in the same classroom. On the outside, they were equal. But their lives turned out very different." Daniel listened carefully. Aaron, Clara continued, was always waiting. Waiting for someone to help him. Waiting for someone to explain things. Waiting for someone to tell him what to do. He would say things like, "I don't know how," or "It's too hard," or "I can't do this unless someone helps me." He waited for inspiration. He waited for motivation. He waited for life to become easier. "Did he try?" Daniel asked. Clara gave a gentle smile. "He did sometimes. But only sometimes. And when something became difficult, he stopped. He believed that the world decided his future, not himself." "And the other boy?" Daniel asked softly. "Miles," she said, "was different. Not stronger. Not smarter. Just different in the way he thought. When he didn't understand something, he stayed after class. When he failed a test, he didn't complain, he tried again. When he wanted to learn more, he didn't wait for someone to teach him, he went to the library. He searched for answers, he asked questions. He believed that if he didn't know something today, he could learn it tomorrow. Clara paused and looked down for a moment, remembering. Aaron reacted to everything, she continued. If he was tired, he didn't study. If he was sad, he didn't try. If he didn't understand something, he gave up. His emotions controlled his actions. And Miles? Daniel asked. Miles responded, Clara said. And that is the difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is fast, emotional, without thinking. But a response is a choice, a decision. A moment when you pause, think, and act from your values instead of your feelings. Daniel felt something deep inside him shift again. Clara continued, one afternoon, I gave both boys the same assignment. It was simple. They had to read a short article and write a one-page reflection about it. I told them they had 3 days. That doesn't sound too hard, Daniel said. No, Clara agreed, but life doesn't test us with difficulty. Life tests us with time. 3 days is enough to do something well, but only if you plan and take responsibility. Daniel nodded slowly. Well, Clara said, Aaron forgot about the assignment. He didn't write anything. On the last evening, he remembered, but instead of trying, he became angry. He blamed me, he blamed the school, he blamed the assignment. He said he was too tired, too busy, too stressed, too confused. But the truth was, he didn't choose to act. And Miles? Daniel asked. Miles wrote the assignment on the first day, Clara said. Then on the second day, he read it again and made small improvements. On the third day, he asked me if he could write another version because he wanted it to be better. Daniel's mouth opened a little. He chose to do more? Yes, Clara said, smiling wide now. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to learn. He decided to take responsibility. He decided to grow. And years later, you know what happened. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Aaron struggled, Clara said quietly. He always looked for someone to blame. He always waited for someone to fix things. And life became heavier and heavier for him. And Miles? Daniel asked. Miles succeeded, Clara said. Not because the world gave him an easy path, but because he walked his own path. He took action. He asked questions. He built the habit of responsibility. He learned the meaning of proactivity. A long silence followed. Daniel looked at the floor, thinking deeply. Then he asked, Why are you telling me this story? Clara looked at him gently. Because today, you look like someone who is ready to stop being Aaron and ready to start becoming Miles. Those words hit Daniel in the heart. Not in a painful way. In a powerful way. A way that made him feel seen. A way that made him feel understood. A way that made him feel capable. He took a deep breath. I want that, he said softly. I want to be like Miles. Clara smiled at him. Then don't wait. Don't hope. Don't react. Respond. Choose your actions. Choose your thoughts. Choose your words. Choose the person you want to be. Every day. Even in small moments. Especially in small moments. That is proactivity. Daniel felt warmth in his chest. A kind of quiet energy he hadn't felt in a long time. A small voice inside him whispered, I can start today. For the rest of the morning, Daniel worked with new intention. He cleaned the shelves with care. He spoke to customers with patience. He listened more. He complained less. And every time something felt annoying or difficult, he paused and asked himself, Am I reacting or responding? And each time he chose to respond, he felt stronger. More confident. More awake. Around noon, a young woman entered the store. She looked stressed and frustrated. She carried a broken pair of headphones and said sharply, These stopped working after 1 week. I want a refund. Her tone was angry. Her eyes were cold. Normally, Daniel would react. He would become tense. He would defend himself. He would feel attacked. But today was different. He paused. He breathed. He remembered the story of the two students. And then he responded with calm, simple words. I'm sorry to hear that. Let me check the issue. I'll do my best to help you. The woman blinked. Her shoulders relaxed. Her voice softened. In that moment, Daniel understood something powerful. Your energy influences the energy of others. Your behavior teaches others how to behave. Your reaction can create fire or peace, but your response can create connection. The rest of the day continued like that, small moments, small choices, small victories. Nothing dramatic, nothing huge, but everything meaningful. When the shift ended and Daniel walked out of the store, he saw the evening sunlight shining between the buildings. The sky was warm and golden, and he felt proud of himself. Not because he had done something big, but because he had changed the way he lived the day. As he walked home, he thought about Clara's story again. He imagined the two boys, the one who waited and the one who acted, the one who reacted and the one who responded, the one who blamed and the one who grew. And Daniel whispered to himself, I want to be the student who grows. Little did he know, the next day would bring a challenge. A real challenge. A challenge that would test everything he had learned. A challenge that would show him what proactivity truly means. And that is where our story will go next. The challenge that changes everything. Daniel woke up the next morning feeling lighter than usual. Not excited, not confident, just a little lighter, as if something inside him had opened overnight. He stretched his arms, listened to the quiet morning sounds outside his window, and thought about the promise he made to himself. Today, I will do one thing that moves me forward. It was a simple promise. A small promise. But it felt important. He got dressed, made some tea, and looked at his notebook again. The same notebook he had opened yesterday. But now it didn't make him feel sad. It made him feel hopeful. As he touched the pages, he remembered Clara's story about Aaron and Miles. And he whispered to himself, I choose to be like Miles today. But life doesn't reward you immediately. Life doesn't clap for you the moment you make a good choice. Life tests you first. It checks if your choice is real, if your mindset is true, if your intention is strong. And that morning, without warning, life gave Daniel a test. It began when he arrived at the bus stop. The bus was late. Very late. The sign said 8:10 a.m., but the clock on his phone said 8:22. People around him started complaining. Some sighed loudly. Some said, this always happens. Some became angry and impatient. This was the perfect moment for old Daniel to return. Old Daniel who reacted quickly. Old Daniel who became frustrated. Old Daniel who blamed everything. He felt the old reaction rising inside him, a small fire, a little spark of anger. But then he paused. He took a slow breath. He looked up at the sky instead of the bus. This is a test, he whispered to himself. I can react or I can respond. So he responded. He relaxed his shoulders. He breathed slowly. He accepted the moment. And, because he responded calmly, something happened. His mind stayed clear. His emotions stayed soft. And the morning felt peaceful instead of stressful. The bus finally arrived at 8:29. Late, noisy, and crowded. People pushed in quickly. Some argued. Some complained. But Daniel moved slowly, stepped inside, found a small space near the door, and held onto the metal bar. The bus began moving, and the familiar city streets passed by the windows. Daniel felt the soft vibration of the road and tried to stay present. But then, the second test came. The bus stopped suddenly, and someone bumped into him hard. A young man wearing headphones turned around and said sharply, "Watch where you're standing." For a moment, Daniel felt heat rise up in his chest. His mind wanted to say something back. Something defensive. Something angry. But then he remembered his promise. He remembered the story. He remembered the word he was learning, proactivity. He took a small breath and said, "Sorry about that. Are you okay?" The young man looked surprised. He removed his headphones slightly and blinked. "Oh, yeah. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to snap at you." Daniel nodded gently. "It's okay." And just like that, the tension dissolved. A moment that could have turned into conflict turned into connection instead. That is the power of responding instead of reacting. The bus ride continued. People got off. Others got on. The morning sun became stronger. And finally, Daniel arrived at his stop. He stepped off the bus feeling proud again. Not because everything went perfectly, but because he chose his actions instead of letting his emotions control him. But this was only the beginning. When he reached the store, he noticed something unusual. The lights inside were off. The front door was open. And his coworker, Mia, stood outside with a worried expression. "What happened?" Daniel asked. Mia looked stressed. The computer system crashed. All the customer records, all the sales information, everything is stuck. And Clara isn't here yet. Daniel felt a familiar sinking feeling in his stomach. A feeling that whispered, "This is too hard. This is too much. You can't handle this." But then the new voice inside him spoke softly, one step at a time. He walked inside. The store felt strange without the usual soft background music. The screens were dark. The cash register wouldn't open. Some customers were already waiting outside the door. "What do we do?" Mia asked. Daniel took a breath. "First, we stay calm." He walked to the computer, pressed the power button, and watched as the machine flickered weakly. Nothing happened. He checked the router. Still nothing. And then a loud voice came from the doorway. A customer, a tall man with a red face, was frustrated. "Are you open or not?" "I've been waiting 10 minutes. Another test." Daniel turned around slowly. "Good morning, sir," he said softly. "We're having some technical problems, but we'll help you as soon as we can." The man crossed his arms. "This is ridiculous." Old Daniel would have felt angry. Old Daniel would have wanted to defend himself. But new Daniel felt steady. He did not take the anger personally. He did not react. He responded. "I understand," Daniel said calmly. "Thank you for your patience. We will try our best." The man didn't smile. But he also didn't continue shouting. And that was enough. Mia looked at Daniel with wide eyes. "How are you so calm?" Daniel smiled a little. "I'm practicing." After a moment, he had an idea. The computer was not working, but the store had a small backup tablet. It couldn't do everything, but it could handle some tasks. Daniel turned it on and checked if it worked. It did. Slowly, but it worked. So he told Mia, "Let's use this for simple sales." "It's not perfect, but it's something." Mia nodded. "Okay." The two of them opened the store and started helping customers one by one. It was slow. It was messy. It was stressful. But they kept going. They kept moving forward. Sometimes the tablet froze. Sometimes customers became impatient. Sometimes Daniel felt overwhelmed. But each time he paused, breathed, and asked himself the same question. Am I reacting or responding? And each time he responded, he felt calmer, stronger, more in control. Hours passed. The store finally quieted down. The busy morning rush was over. And at that moment, Clara walked in. She looked around at the tired faces, the messy counter, and the half-working tablet. "What on earth happened here?" she asked. Mia explained everything quickly. When she finished, Clara turned to Daniel. "And how did you handle all of this?" Daniel shrugged softly. "We just did what we could, one thing at a time." Clara smiled, not a small smile, but a warm, proud smile. You responded, she said. You didn't panic. You didn't blame. You didn't wait. You responded. That is proactivity. Daniel felt something warm in his chest again. A kind of quiet pride. A kind of inner strength. Clara touched his shoulder lightly. And Daniel, I'm proud of you. Those words stayed in his mind all day. The rest of the afternoon was calm. The computer slowly began working again. Customers returned their smiles. The store felt normal again. But inside Daniel, nothing was normal anymore. Something had changed. Something deep. On his way home, he thought about the day. 3 tests. 3 challenges. 3 moments that could have gone wrong. But each time, he responded with intention. He looked at the people walking around him, the traffic, the buildings, the trees by the sidewalk. Everything looked calm. But he felt something powerful inside. Then he whispered to himself, "This is what change feels like." He didn't suddenly have a perfect life. But he had something better control. Not control of the world, but control of himself. And that is the foundation of proactivity. When he reached home, he sat on his bed, opened his notebook, and wrote 3 simple sentences. Today I learned I can stay calm. Today I learned I can choose my actions. Today I learned I am stronger than I thought. He looked at the words for a long time. And then he smiled. A real smile. A warm, honest smile. Because he knew something now. Something important. Something true. You don't need a perfect life to be proactive. You just need to make one good choice at a time. Little did he know, a bigger challenge was coming soon. A challenge not from outside, but from inside. And that challenge would show him what proactivity truly means. The day I learned proactivity the hard way. I want to take you into another story now. A story from a day that changed the way I looked at responsibility and action. It was a simple day, nothing special, nothing dramatic, just an ordinary morning in my life. But sometimes, ordinary mornings carry big lessons, and sometimes quiet moments teach us the loudest truths. So, let's walk into this part of the journey slowly, together, like we are walking down a long street with the sun gently rising over our shoulders. And as we walk, I want you to listen carefully, because this story shows how proactivity is not only about big actions. Sometimes it's about small choices that happen in the silence between moments. I remember waking up that morning feeling a little stressed. You know that feeling when you open your eyes and suddenly your mind starts running? It begins to tell you everything you must do. Every task. Every responsibility. Every message you must answer. Every problem that has been waiting for you since yesterday. I lay in my bed for a moment, listening to my own thoughts, and I realized something important. Most of my stress did not come from the tasks themselves. It came from the fact that I had been avoiding them. I had been waiting for things to get better on their own. I had been hoping that problems would magically solve themselves. And I smiled a little because I knew something that never works. Problems don't disappear. They grow bigger when you avoid them. As I got out of bed, I told myself, today, I will be proactive. I will not wait. I will act. But saying something and doing something are very different things. And life loves to test us. After breakfast, I looked at my to-do list. It was long. Too long. It was like a small mountain of tasks. I felt tired just looking at it. You know that moment, right? When you see something you have been avoiding and your heart feels a little heavy. But instead of closing the notebook and pretending the list didn't exist, I took a deep breath. I said softly one thing. Just one thing. Let's start with one. And I picked the simplest task, replying to an important email I had been ignoring for 4 days. You won't believe this. That email took me only 4 minutes to write. 4 minutes. But avoiding it made me feel stressed for 4 days. And that was the moment I realized something powerful. Sometimes the fear of doing something is bigger than the thing itself. When we act, fear shrinks. When we avoid, fear grows. I felt proud for a moment, a small success, but still a success. But life wasn't finished teaching me that day. Later in the afternoon, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a friend. He said, "Can we talk? I need help." And I hesitated. I was tired. I had more tasks to finish. My mind began making excuses. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but something in my heart whispered, "This is important. Don't wait." So I called him immediately. He was going through a difficult time. He felt lost. He didn't know how to face some challenges in his life. And as I listened to him, I realized something surprising. Many of the problems he had were also coming from hesitation, from waiting, from avoiding necessary actions. He knew what he should do, but he was afraid to do it. He was waiting for the right moment, but the right moment never comes on its own. As we talked, I shared the small lesson I had learned that morning, that tiny actions can open big doors. And as I said those words, I realized they were true not only for him, but for me, for you, for all of us. Life changes when we take responsibility for our choices, our reactions, and our decisions. Life changes when we stop blaming situations, people, or luck. Life changes when we stop saying, "Maybe later," and start saying, "I will start now." After the call, I stood near my window and looked outside. The sky was turning orange. Birds were flying across the soft evening light. And I thought to myself, this is what proactivity looks like. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it does not scream. Proactivity is quiet. It is a whisper inside us that says, you can act. You can choose. You are responsible. But the day still had one more lesson for me. In the evening, I went outside to buy a few things from a grocery shop. As I was walking back home, I saw a man struggling with his bicycle. The chain had fallen off. Cars were passing. People were walking. But no one stopped. And for a moment, I also felt like walking past him. I was tired, and it was getting dark. But then I heard that small whisper again, "Don't wait. Act." So I walked to him and said, "Do you need help?" He looked surprised, then smiled. Together, we fixed the chain in just a minute. 1 minute. But the man looked at me with a warm expression and said, "Thank you. You didn't have to stop." I smiled and told him, "It's okay. Sometimes we all need a little help." As I walked away, I realized something beautiful. 1 minute of action can change someone's entire day. One small proactive choice can create light in another person's life. And when we choose to act, not only do we help others, we help ourselves. We build confidence. We grow. We become stronger. When I reached home, I sat down for a moment, closed my eyes, and reviewed my day. At first it felt like a normal day. Nothing big. Nothing dramatic. But slowly, I saw it differently. It was a day full of choices. Every hour, life had asked me a question: will you act? Or will you wait? And every time I chose to act, my world became a little clearer, a little lighter, a little better. Proactivity, I learned, is not something you study in a book. It is something you practice in real life. It is choosing responsibility instead of excuses. It is choosing action instead of fear. It is choosing to do something now instead of waiting for perfect conditions. Because perfect conditions never come. We create those conditions by acting. And before I went to bed that night, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and said something simple, something honest, something I want you to say to yourself too: I can shape my day. I can shape my life. I can choose action. That is the heart of proactivity. It gives you power. Not the power to control everything, but the power to control yourself. And that is enough. That is where real change begins. The invisible wall that stops us from acting. Before we move forward, I want to take you into a quiet place inside the mind, a place we all know very well, even if we don't talk about it. It is that invisible space where we stop ourselves before we even begin. It is like an invisible wall that stands between us and the things we want to do. And today, I want us to look at that invisible wall together, slowly and gently, because understanding it is the first step to breaking it. Imagine this scene. You want to start something new. Maybe you want to study English a little more seriously. Maybe you want to wake up earlier every morning. Maybe you want to start exercising. Maybe you want to complete a task that you have been avoiding for weeks. You take a breath, you think about it, you feel motivated, and you say, yes, I will do it. But then, something happens. Something quiet. Something small. Something that feels like a soft voice inside your head saying, maybe later. And without even knowing why, you stop. Has that ever happened to you? Of course it has. It happens to all of us. This invisible wall is not made of bricks or stones. It is made of doubts, fears, and habits that live deep inside us. It is made of old thoughts that whisper, what if you fail? Or what if it's too hard? Or what if you are not ready? This wall doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't shout. On that day when I decided to be proactive, I noticed something. Every time I wanted to act, the wall appeared. When I wanted to reply to the email, the wall appeared. When my friend needed help, the wall appeared. When I saw the man with the broken bicycle, the wall appeared again. And do you know what the wall said? It said, not now. The wall always says, not now. Maybe you know this wall in your own life. Maybe you've seen it when you wanted to speak English with someone and your heart started beating fast. Maybe you've seen it when you wanted to apply for a job but felt scared. Maybe you've seen it when you wanted to start a new habit but your mind said, tomorrow. Tomorrow will be better. This wall is invisible, but it is powerful. The question is, where does this wall come from? Let me tell you a story that might help you understand. A few years ago, I signed up for a workshop. It was a simple workshop where people learned to express themselves more confidently. On the first day, the instructor asked everyone to stand up one by one and speak for 1 minute. Just 1 minute. 1 minute is not long, right? But when my turn came, I felt nervous. My hands felt a little cold. My throat felt dry. And the invisible wall rose in front of me like a mountain. I remember thinking, what if I forget my words? What if people judge me? What if I sound strange? The wall grew bigger and bigger inside my mind. But then a small thought appeared. Just begin. Just take one step. And I did. I started speaking. My voice was a little shaky at first, but after 10 seconds, it became steady. After 20 seconds, I began enjoying it. By the end of the minute, I felt something amazing. I was stronger than the wall. That day I learned something important. The invisible wall disappears the moment you take the first step. Not after thinking. Not after waiting. But after stepping forward. But the story doesn't end there. During the break, I talked to another participant. She said something that changed the way I thought about fear. She said, fear is not the enemy. The enemy is the belief that fear is stronger than you. And that sentence stayed in my mind for a long time. Fear is natural. Hesitation is natural. Doubt is natural. But the belief that these things control us, that is the real problem. And that belief is what creates the invisible wall. Proactivity means choosing action even when the wall is present. It does not mean that fear disappears. It means that you move anyway. It means that you stop waiting for the perfect time. It means that you stop waiting to feel ready. It means that you stop saying one day and start saying today. Let me tell you another small example. One day, I decided to start a morning running routine. I bought shoes. I prepared a schedule. I told myself, tomorrow morning, I will start. But the next morning, the wall was waiting for me at the door. It whispered, you slept late last night, maybe skip today. The next day, it whispered again, you are too tired, maybe skip today too. And for a whole week, I didn't run even once. The wall wins when we don't take the first step. But one morning, I did something different. I didn't think. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate with the wall. I simply stood up, put on my shoes, and walked outside. I told myself, just walk for 2 minutes. Not running, just walking. And guess what happened? Those 2 minutes turned into 10 minutes. 10 minutes turned into a short run. And that short run turned into a habit that stayed with me for months. The same idea can help you with English. Many people say, I will start speaking when my English becomes better. But the truth is, English becomes better when you start speaking. The wall that says later is strongest at the beginning. But the moment you speak one sentence, one line, one simple phrase, the wall begins to crack. So how do we break this invisible wall? Not with force. Not with pressure. Not with big, dramatic actions. No, we break it with small steps. Gentle steps. Steps we can repeat every day. We break it by starting. Let me explain something that helped me a lot. Imagine a small door on the invisible wall. It is very small, so small that you cannot see it at first. But that door opens only when you take the first step. When you start, even without confidence, even without energy, even without clarity, that door quietly opens, and the wall becomes weaker. Maybe you have felt this before. The moment you begin something, reading, practicing, studying, cleaning, working, something changes. You feel lighter. You feel focused. You feel a little stronger. That is the power of starting. So today, I want to ask you something simple. What is one small action you can take today? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you feel ready. But today. Is it sending a message? Is it completing a small task? Is it practicing English for 5 minutes? Is it cleaning one corner of your room? Is it apologizing to someone? Is it planning your day? Whatever it is, make it small. Make it simple. Make it easy. And then do it. Because one small action can change the direction of your day. And a few small actions can change the direction of your life. As I learned more about myself, I understood something deeper. The invisible wall will always be there. It never goes away completely. But each time you take action, you make the wall thinner. You make it weaker. And slowly, step by step, your world becomes bigger. Before we end this section, I want you to imagine something. Imagine yourself standing in front of your own invisible wall. Maybe it looks tall. Maybe it looks wide. Maybe it looks impossible to cross. But now imagine taking one step forward. Imagine touching the wall with your hand. Imagine pushing it gently. And imagine feeling that wall begin to move, just a little. That small movement, that tiny crack is where growth begins. Because proactivity is not about being perfect. It is not about being brave all the time. It is not about having all the answers. Proactivity is about one thing, choosing action even when the wall is still there. And the moment you understand that, the moment you begin practicing that, your life begins to change, quietly, slowly, beautifully. The power of tiny wins. Let's take a deep breath now and begin a new step in our journey. You and I have looked at the meaning of proactivity, we've explored stories, we've talked about the invisible wall inside us. Now I want to guide you into something even more important, something so small that most people ignore it, but so powerful that it can transform your entire life. Today, we talk about tiny wins, the small victories that shape who we become. You see, people often wait for big success. They wait for the perfect moment when everything changes at once. They wait for the day they suddenly become confident, fluent, organized, disciplined, motivated. But life doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't happen in one big moment. Growth happens in tiny steps, small actions repeated again and again until they become strong. Tiny wins are the hidden secret of proactive people. They don't wait for huge results. They focus on small actions they can do today, right now, even if those actions look almost too simple. Let me take you back to another moment in my life, one that taught me the true magic of tiny wins. It was a rainy day. The sky was dark, and the sound of raindrops filled the air like soft music. I was sitting at my desk, feeling overwhelmed. My life felt messy. My mind felt crowded. I didn't know where to start. And for a moment, I wanted to give up on everything. I wanted to close my notebook and walk away from all my responsibilities. But something gentle happened. I looked around my room, and my eyes landed on the corner of my desk where a single pen was lying out of place. A pen. Just a pen. It wasn't a big problem. It wasn't something important. But something inside me whispered, "Put the pen back where it belongs." I don't know why, but I listened. I lifted the pen and placed it inside the holder. And when I did that, something inside me shifted. I felt a tiny wave of energy. A tiny sense of control. A tiny feeling of, okay, I can do this. It was such a small action, almost meaningless, but it brought a kind of calm. So I moved the notebook to the center of the table. That felt good too. Then I placed a book back on the shelf. Then I folded a piece of paper. And slowly, one small action at a time, the room began to look cleaner, calmer, lighter. I didn't clean the whole room in 1 hour. I didn't transform my life in one big moment. All I did was take one tiny action. And that tiny win gave me enough energy to take the next tiny action. And then the next. And then the next. By the end of the evening, my room was organized. My mind felt clearer. My heart felt lighter. And that night, as I lay in bed listening to the rain, I understood something powerful. Small actions can open big doors. Tiny wins matter. You might think, how can something so small make a difference? But let me tell you a truth that changed my life. Momentum starts small. A small action leads to a small improvement. That small improvement gives you motivation. That motivation leads to another action. And before you know it, you are moving forward with strength you didn't know you had. Let me share another example: language learning. Many people believe they need to study for 1 hour every day to improve their English. But the truth is, you can grow even with 5 minutes a day if you do it consistently. 5 minutes may look small. It may look weak. But imagine this. 5 minutes every day for 1 year is more than 30 hours of practice. That is power. That is progress. That is a collection of tiny wins that build a new version of you. But here is the magical part. Tiny wins don't only build skill. They build identity. When you take a small action, you are telling yourself, I am someone who takes action. When you choose to act instead of waiting, you train your brain to believe that you are capable, strong, focused, and proactive. Let me take you to another moment in my life, a difficult one. I was working on a project that felt too big for me. Every time I looked at it, I felt anxious. It felt impossible. I would open my laptop, stare at the screen, and then close it because the task scared me. I kept thinking, I must finish everything today. And because the task was big, I avoided it completely. Then one morning, I decided to try something different. I said, I will work on this project for 3 minutes. Only 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I can stop. 3 minutes is nothing, right? But I set a timer and started working. I wrote one sentence, then another, then another. And by the time the timer rang, I didn't want to stop. I continued for 20 more minutes. And suddenly, the task didn't look so big anymore. Do you see what happened? Tiny wins break big problems into simple pieces. Proactivity doesn't mean doing everything. It means doing something small, something simple, something achievable. The magic of tiny wins is that they build confidence. They give you a sense of movement. They make you feel alive. Sometimes we wait for motivation before acting. But proactive people don't wait for motivation. They create motivation through action. When you take one step, motivation follows you. When you start, energy comes. When you begin, confidence grows. But if you wait for motivation first, you may wait forever. I want to share a small story about a boy I once met. His name was Daniel. He was learning English, but he felt shy speaking in class. Every time the teacher asked a question, he looked down at his book, hoping the teacher wouldn't call his name. One day, I asked him, "Why don't you speak?" He said something that touched my heart. He said, "I am afraid I will say something wrong." I smiled gently and asked him, "Can you say 3 words?" He looked confused. 3 words. I said, "Yes." Not a full sentence. Not a long answer. Just 3 words. He thought for a moment and whispered, "I don't know." I smiled. "You just spoke 3 words. That is a tiny win." Something opened in his eyes. He realized he could start small. After that, I told him, "Tomorrow, say 4 words. Next week, say 1 sentence." And he did. Tiny wins built his confidence. And months later, Daniel was raising his hand in class, speaking freely, smiling proudly. His teacher told me he is one of the most active students now. But it all began with 3 simple words, a tiny win. I want you to feel the truth of this. Your life does not change when you take one big step. Your life changes when you take many tiny steps. Every day. Slowly. Gently. Consistently. Let me give you another example. A story about a friend of mine named Sophia. She wanted to read more books, but she always felt too busy. Every night she said, "I don't have time." But one evening, she decided to read for just 2 minutes before bed. 2 minutes is nothing. But she opened her book and read 1 paragraph. The next night, she read for 3 minutes. The night after that, 5 minutes. 3 months later, she finished 3 books. She didn't become a reader by reading for hours. She became a reader through tiny wins. Now think about your own life. Think about something you want to improve. Your English. Your health. Your habits. Your confidence. Your skills. What tiny win can you start with? Maybe 1 sentence of English practice every day. Maybe 1 glass of water. Maybe 1 small task completed. Maybe 1 step outside for fresh air. Maybe 1 minute of cleaning. Maybe 1 message to a friend. Tiny wins are not small, they are seeds. And seeds grow into trees. Let me take you into a final moment before we close this section. Imagine yourself standing in a quiet room. The air is calm. There is a small candle on a table. That candle is your goal. Every tiny action you take is like adding a drop of oil to the candle. 1 drop looks like nothing, but many drops keep the flame burning. And when the flame burns, your path becomes bright. That is the power of tiny wins. They keep you moving. They keep you growing. They keep your inner flame alive. And when you understand this, when you begin to practice tiny wins every day, you will see a beautiful change in your life. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, gently, quietly, the best kind of change. How proactive people think differently. Now that we've walked through tiny wins, fear, hesitation, and the invisible wall inside us, I want to take you into a different room inside the mind, the room where proactive thinking begins. In this section, I want you to imagine that you and I are sitting together in a quiet place, maybe near a window, maybe with warm sunlight touching the floor, and we are talking softly about how proactive people think differently from the rest of the world. Because action begins in the mind. Before our hands move, before our feet move, before our voice speaks, our thoughts shape our direction. You see, proactive people do not have special powers. They do not have easier lives. They do not wake up with perfect motivation every day. They simply think in a different way, a gentle but powerful way. Their thoughts guide them toward action instead of avoidance. Their mindset guides them forward instead of holding them back. Let me begin with a small moment from my life. One morning, I woke up feeling tired and unmotivated. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to study. I didn't want to do anything. And as I sat on the edge of my bed, I asked myself a simple question. What do proactive people do when they feel this way? I knew the answer. They don't wait for perfect motivation. They create it. They take one small step. They begin even when they don't feel ready. That morning, I told myself, just start for 2 minutes. And I did. 2 minutes became 5. 5 became 20. And soon, I was moving again. And that is the first way proactive people think. Proactive people ask, what can I do right now, instead of, why is this happening to me? Most people focus on problems. Proactive people focus on possibilities. Most people look at obstacles. Proactive people look at options. Most people wait for the right mood. Proactive people create the right mood by taking action. Let me take you into a story that taught me this difference clearly. Many years ago, I met a man named Mr. Harris. He was an older man, kind eyes, soft voice, calm smile. One day, during a conversation, he said something that sounded simple but felt very deep. He said, there are 2 kinds of people in this world, people who react to life and people who respond to life. I didn't understand at first, but he smiled and continued, reactive people wait for things to happen. Proactive people make things happen. Then he told me a story from his youth. When he was a young man, he worked in a small workshop. One day, a machine broke. Everyone stood around the machine complaining. Why did this happen? Who is responsible? What a terrible day. They talked and talked, but nobody acted. Mr. Harris, who was new at the workshop, quietly took out a small tool and began examining the machine. He didn't know how to fix it completely, but he knew how to tighten a few screws. And when he tightened those screws, the machine started working again. His coworkers looked at him and said, "How did you fix it?" And he smiled and said, "I didn't know I could. I just tried." That day, he learned an important truth. You don't need all the answers to take the first step. You only need the willingness to try. That is how proactive people think. They don't ask, "Can I do this perfectly?" They ask, "What can I do now, even if it's not perfect?" Let's go deeper. Another difference in proactive thinking is this. Proactive people focus on what they can control. Reactive people focus on what they cannot control. Imagine this scene. You plan to go for a walk. The sky is clear. But just as you step outside, it begins to rain. A reactive person says, "Oh no, the rain ruined my plan. Why does this always happen to me?" They feel angry. They feel unlucky. They blame the situation. But a proactive person thinks differently. They say, "I can't control the rain, but I can choose what to do next." Maybe they take an umbrella and walk anyway. Maybe they walk inside their home. Maybe they change the plan and do something else productive. Their mind looks for choices instead of problems. When you focus on what you can control, you feel powerful. When you focus on what you cannot control, you feel helpless. This mindset can change your whole life. Let me give you a simple example from language learning. You cannot control how native speakers talk. You cannot control how fast a movie speaks. You cannot control the difficulty of a podcast. But you can control how much you practice. You can control how often you listen. You can control how you react when you make mistakes. Proactive thinkers see mistakes as learning moments. Reactive thinkers see mistakes as proof they should stop. Now, let's talk about something deeper. Proactive people ask better questions. Reactive questions sound like this. Why is everything so difficult? Why does this always happen to me? When will things get better? These questions lead to sadness, stress, and helplessness. Proactive questions sound like this. What can I do to make this better? What small step can I take right now? What good can I learn from this? These questions lead to action, growth, and strength. Let me share a personal moment. A few years ago, I was going through a challenging period. Everything felt heavy. My schedule, my work, my responsibilities, it all felt too much. I remember sitting alone in my room one evening. I asked myself, why is my life like this? And the moment I asked that, I felt worse. I felt stuck. Later, someone wise told me, you asked the wrong question. They told me, next time, ask yourself, what can I do today to make things even 1% better? So the next day, I asked that question. And I did one small thing. And the next day, 1% more. Slowly, things changed. Not because my problems disappeared, but because my thinking changed. This brings me to another powerful truth. Proactive people think long-term, even when taking small steps. Reactive people think short-term and often give up. Proactive thinking is not fast thinking. It is gentle, patient, quiet. Proactive people understand that small actions today become big results later. They understand that progress is slow but steady. They understand that consistency wins over intensity. Let me share a story to show this clearly. There was a young woman named Amina. She wanted to improve her English pronunciation. She felt embarrassed when she spoke. She wanted fast results. She wanted a perfect accent in 1 month. But that never happened. She felt disappointed. She felt reactive. One day, she decided to try something new. She practiced just 5 minutes a day, but she practiced every day. Slowly, her pronunciation improved. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but little by little. And after 1 year, she sounded confident and clear. Her friends said, "How did you do it?" And she smiled and said, 5 minutes a day. Proactive thinking is not about doing everything. It's about doing something consistently. But now let's go even deeper, the emotional core of proactive thinking. Proactive thinkers don't wait to feel confident before they act. They act even when they feel afraid. They act even when they feel uncertain. They act even when they feel tired. They understand something important. Confidence comes from action, not the other way around. One step creates confidence. One tiny win builds belief. One moment of courage becomes a habit. Let me end this section with a scene I want you to imagine. You are standing in front of a small path. The sun is setting. The wind is soft. The path looks long, maybe too long. You feel unsure. You feel small. But then you take one step forward. Just one. And in that moment, the world changes a little. You feel something inside you open, a small light, a small strength. That light is proactive thinking. Because proactive thinking is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not perfect. It is simple, gentle, steady. It is the quiet voice inside that says, I will begin. And I will keep going. The quiet shift inside me. When I woke up the next morning, something felt different. It was a small feeling, soft like the first light of sunrise, but it was there. I sat on my bed for a moment and listened to the quiet around me. No rushing thoughts. No stress. No feeling that life was chasing me from one task to another. And I wondered, is this what proactivity feels like at the very beginning? Not a loud change. Not a big moment. But a gentle shift. A small space inside the mind that suddenly opens, like a window letting in fresh air. I stood up slowly, smiling to myself, because maybe for the first time I understood something important. Becoming proactive doesn't start with action. It starts with awareness. Awareness of where you stand. Awareness of how you react. Awareness of what you want to change. And awareness that you can change. I felt lighter that morning. Not because my life was fixed, not because my problems had disappeared, but because something inside me had moved. Like a gear finally turning after being stuck for many years. When I walked into the kitchen, the sunlight touched the floor in a soft, golden way, and the whole room felt peaceful. I made tea and sat at the table, enjoying the warm cup in my hands. It was such a small moment, but for some reason, it felt like the start of something. A beginning. Maybe proactivity starts in moments like this, moments when life is quiet enough for you to hear yourself think. Moments when you stop fighting the world and start listening to who you can become. I thought about the old version of me, the me from just a few days ago, running from one thing to another, reacting to everything, feeling like the world was controlling me. And now, for the first time, I felt like I was slowly stepping into the driver's seat. Not fully, not completely, but a little more than before. I opened my notebook and wrote a single sentence. Today, I choose who I want to be. Just one sentence. But it felt powerful. It felt like a seed I had planted in the soil of my mind. And maybe, if I gave it enough time, attention, and care, it would grow into something strong. Later that morning, I walked outside for a short walk. The air felt cool and clean, the world around me moving at its own quiet pace. People passed by, some walking fast, some slow, some on their phones, some lost in thought. I realized something interesting. Everyone is carrying their own world inside them. Their hopes, their fears, their regrets, their dreams. And all of those things influence how they react to life. Some people look calm because they are in control. Some look stressed because life is controlling them. And I wondered, which person am I becoming? As I kept walking, I noticed a little boy trying to reach a book on a high shelf in a small street library box. The boy jumped 3 times, trying to grab it. But the book stayed just out of reach. After a moment, he looked around and saw a small wooden crate. He dragged it toward the shelf, stepped on it, and finally reached the book. And then he smiled, a big, bright, joyful smile. Watching him, I realized something simple but beautiful. Proactivity is not complicated. It is not mysterious. It is simply the willingness to try something different when the usual way doesn't work. Instead of giving up, the boy looked for a solution. Instead of complaining, he acted. Instead of waiting for help, he found help. And I thought, maybe adults forget that. Maybe we grow up and become reactive because we stop looking for crates to stand on. We stop trying creative solutions. We stop believing that small actions can make a difference. I stood there for a moment, watching the boy run away with his book, and I took a deep breath. Yes, proactivity is simple. And maybe that is why we miss it. We expect a big feeling, a big change, a big achievement. But proactivity is quiet. It lives in small choices. It hides inside simple actions. It whispers, but it never shouts. When I walked back home, my steps felt slower but more confident. And it was then I realized that the shift inside me was not just emotional, it was becoming practical. I began thinking differently. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" I started asking, "What can I do now?" Instead of expecting things to magically improve, I started planning small steps. Instead of reacting to problems with panic, I responded with curiosity. I felt a sense of control, not complete control over life, but control over myself. And that was enough. That was the beginning of everything. Later that afternoon, as I prepared my lunch, I remembered something my mentor once said. Proactivity is the art of choosing your next step with your mind, not your emotions. And suddenly, those words made sense. I used to think reacting quickly meant I was strong or smart. But now I understood that reacting quickly usually means reacting emotionally. And emotions are like waves. They rise and fall. They change shape. They move unpredictably. If you let emotions drive your life becomes as unstable as water. But if you let your mind choose your steps, you build a solid ground to walk on. A foundation. I sat at the table again and looked at the sentence I wrote earlier. Today, I choose who I want to be. And I asked myself, who do I want to be today? Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not in the future. But today, right now. And the answer came softly. I want to be a little better than yesterday. Not perfect. Not amazing. Not extraordinary. Just better. A little more aware. A little calmer. A little more in control. A little more willing to act. A little more proactive. In the late evening, I stepped outside again to breathe the fresh air. The sky was turning orange and pink. People walked past me, laughing, talking, living their lives. And I stood there quietly, feeling proud of myself, not for a big achievement, but for noticing this small shift inside me. Because that shift was real. And it was mine. And it was the beginning of a new version of me, a version who chooses, who acts, who leads, who responds, who grows. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt calm. Not excited. Not overwhelmed. Just calm. And in that calm space, I whispered to myself, this is how change begins. Not with noise, but with quiet. And I fell asleep feeling grateful for the smallest, simplest shift, the one that changed everything. The day everything tested me. The next morning began like any other quiet day, but something unexpected happened before I even finished my breakfast. You know those days when life suddenly throws many things at you at the same time? Days when you feel as if the universe is asking, are you really ready for change? Well, that was one of those days for me. I woke up feeling peaceful, steady, and completely sure that I was becoming more proactive. I thought the world would support this new feeling. But the world doesn't always work like that. Sometimes, when you start changing, life tests you, not to stop you, but to make you stronger. And that morning, the test came fast, like a door suddenly opening in a storm. I was making tea when my phone vibrated. One message, then another, then a third. I looked at the screen and felt my heart drop a little. The first message was from my coworker saying that the project deadline had been moved earlier. The second message was from my landlord reminding me about a repair issue I had completely forgotten about. And the third was from a friend asking, can we talk? Something happened. 3 different problems. 3 different directions. And all at once. A few days ago, the old me would react immediately with stress. My mind would spin. My heart would beat fast. I would rush, worry, maybe complain, maybe panic. I would feel attacked by life. But now, something inside me paused. I didn't react. I breathed. I slowed down. I touched the warm cup in my hands and let the moment settle. And in that pause, I remembered something important. Proactivity begins where reactivity ends. Instead of jumping into panic, I asked myself a quiet question. What is the first thing that needs my attention? Just one question. But that question changed everything. I looked at the 3 messages again, and instead of seeing 3 problems, I saw 3 steps. And steps can be taken one at a time. I finished my tea before doing anything else. That small choice made me smile, because it showed me I was growing. I wasn't letting the outside world control my inside world. I was choosing my pace, my speed, my state of mind. Then I wrote down 3 simple notes on a page. Project deadline. Landlord repair. Friend call, but I didn't write them as problems. I wrote them as tasks. A problem makes you feel heavy. A task makes you feel capable. Then I chose the first step, the simplest one. I messaged my coworker, got it. I'll adjust my schedule and update you soon. No stress. No long explanation. Just a calm response. Then I called my landlord and scheduled a repair time. 2 minutes. Done. But the third message, the one from my friend, felt heavier. So I sat down and called her. And when she answered, I could hear she was trying not to cry. I listened quietly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't try to fix everything. I just listened. And after a while, she sighed and said, "Thank you. I feel better." And I realized something painful but beautiful. Sometimes being proactive is not about doing. Sometimes it's about being present. When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. It wasn't even noon yet, but I had already faced a small storm. And the interesting part is this: the storm hadn't changed. But I had. A reactive person fights the storm. A proactive person learns how to walk through it. Later in the day, something else happened. I went to work with confidence, but as soon as I entered the office, I noticed a strange tension in the air. People were talking quickly, looking worried, moving from one desk to another. Something was wrong. My manager looked stressed, and a few coworkers whispered to each other. It felt like the whole office was holding its breath. When my manager called me into her office, I felt a small wave of fear inside my chest. But instead of letting the fear control me, I breathed slowly. And I walked in calmly. She looked at me with a serious expression and said, "We have a problem. A major file is missing from the project folder. We need it, and we need it now. Do you know anything about it?" My heart skipped a beat because I remembered that file. I had worked on it last week, but I wasn't the last person who used it. The old me would immediately react, defend myself, explain quickly, maybe even blame someone else. But instead, I stayed quiet for 2 seconds. Just 2 seconds. Enough to create clarity. "No," I said calmly, "but let me help you find it." Her eyes softened. The tension in her shoulders relaxed. And suddenly, the pressure in the room changed. When a person stays calm, the world around them begins to mirror that calm. And within 10 minutes, we found the file in a shared drive folder someone had mislabeled. My manager smiled and said, "Thank you for handling that so well." And I walked out feeling proud, not because I found the file, but because I found control. Control over my reaction. Control over my emotions. Control over myself. On the way home that evening, I realized something powerful. Life does not test you to break you. It tests you to show you who you're becoming. And that day, I saw a new version of myself, a version who could face things without fear. A version who could stay steady in chaos. A version who could act, not react. When I returned home, I sat on my bed in the soft evening light, feeling grateful for the entire day, even the difficult parts. Because those difficulties were not obstacles. They were mirrors. And in those mirrors, I saw myself growing stronger, calmer, clearer, and more proactive. Before sleeping, I whispered one sentence into the quiet room. Today, I passed the test. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly proud of myself. The moment I finally understood proactivity. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had something urgent to do, and not because I couldn't sleep. I woke up early because my mind felt clear, quiet in a way that felt new to me. The room was still dark, and the world outside my window was silent, but inside me there was a feeling of balance, like I finally understood something I had been trying to learn for many years without even knowing it. I sat up in bed and let the stillness wash over me. There was no rush. No pressure. No weight on my shoulders. Just a quiet sense of direction. A feeling that I was moving towards something better, even if I didn't know exactly what it was. And as I sat there on the edge of my bed, I finally understood something important. Proactivity is not only about action. It is a way of living. A way of thinking. A way of choosing. I realized that my entire life I had been waiting. Waiting for the right time. Waiting for motivation. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for good luck. Waiting for something outside me to change before I changed inside. I used to think life would improve automatically if I just kept hoping. But hope without action is like trying to walk without moving your legs. You stay in the same place. you get stuck. Proactivity is the moment you stop waiting. I stood up and opened my window. The early morning air felt cool and gentle, brushing against my face. The sky was slowly changing color from deep blue to a soft gray. The world was waking up. And I felt like I was waking up too, in a deeper way. I thought about everything that had happened over the past few days, the small shift, the storm of messages, the moment at work, the calm I found inside myself. All of those moments were like pieces of a puzzle. And now those pieces were beginning to fit together. They were showing me a picture of who I was becoming. I walked to the kitchen and made breakfast slowly, deliberately. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't thinking about problems. I wasn't worrying about what might happen later. I was simply present, fully here. And I realized that being proactive means being present. You cannot choose your actions clearly when your mind is lost in the past or afraid of the future. Your power exists only in the present moment. Right here. Right now. As I ate my breakfast, I remembered something my mentor once said to me. At that time, I didn't understand it. But now it finally made sense. He said, proactivity is not about controlling everything. It is about controlling the one thing that will always belong to you, yourself. I smiled. Yes, that was it. That was the truth I had been looking for without knowing. And when that truth sank in, something deep inside me relaxed. All the pressure I used to put on myself started to fade. I didn't need to fix everything at once. I didn't need to become perfect. I only needed to choose one good step at a time. One calm response. One thoughtful decision. One moment of awareness. Proactivity was not a mountain I had to climb. It was a path I could walk on, slowly, gently, with steady steps. And this new understanding made my heart feel light. Later that morning, I decided to go for a walk. The sun was rising now, painting the buildings with warm gold. The streets were still quiet, but a few people were starting their day, drivers warming their cars, shopkeepers lifting metal shutters, a woman sweeping in front of her cafe. Everyone was busy with their own life. Everyone walking their own path. And as I watched them, I realized something simple but powerful. Every person you see is fighting a silent battle. Every person is trying to do their best. And every person has a choice, react or respond, fear or courage, worry or action. I wondered how many people understood the power of proactivity. How many people were trapped in reactive cycles, feeling controlled by everything around them. How many people were living on autopilot, waiting for life to change. And I hoped, quietly, that maybe they too would one day feel the shift I was feeling now. As I continued walking, I reached a small park. Children were playing, laughing loudly, running freely, as if the world belonged to them. And in a way, it did. They had not yet learned fear. They had not yet learned doubt. They had not yet learned to react instead of create. Watching them, I felt something warm inside me. Children act before they worry. They try before they think about failure. They explore before they fear mistakes. Maybe that's why they learn so fast. Maybe we adults lose that sense of freedom, that curiosity, that courage, and proactivity is the key to getting it back. I sat on a bench for a moment, letting the morning breeze touch my face. And then a thought came to my mind, gentle, simple, but powerful. I get to choose how I live. Not the world. Not circumstances. Not problems. Not pressure. Not fear. Me. That thought filled me with a quiet strength. A strength that didn't feel loud or intense, but calm and steady. A strength that grows from understanding, not force. A strength that comes from taking responsibility for your actions, your emotions, and your future. And then something beautiful happened, not outside me, but inside. I felt proud of myself. Truly proud. Not because of what I achieved, but because of how I handled myself. Because of who I was becoming. On the way home, everything looked a little different, not because the world had changed, but because I had. The colors felt brighter. The air felt lighter. And I felt more connected to every small thing around me. When I opened the door to my apartment, I paused and whispered to myself, I understand now. And in that quiet doorway, I finally saw the truth. Proactivity is not a skill. It is a way of life. And once you understand it, everything changes. The choice that changed my future. The day after I finally understood proactivity, something happened that pushed me deeper into my own growth journey, something that made me see how powerful one decision can be. It was a quiet afternoon. The sky was gray, the air a little cool, and I was sitting at my desk, finishing some small tasks, when I received an unexpected call from my manager. Her voice sounded calm but serious. She said, "Can you come to the office tomorrow morning? I need to talk to you about something important." For a moment, everything inside me froze. Important? Tomorrow? What did she mean? In the past, I would have reacted instantly with fear. My thoughts would run wild. Did I make a mistake? Am I in trouble? What if something bad happens? My mind would create stories, negative stories, scary stories, stories with no evidence. That was the old reactive me. But this time, I stopped. I felt the first wave of fear wanting to rise, but I didn't let it take control. I placed my phone on the table, took a slow breath, and asked myself the calm question that had become my new strength. Is this fear real, or is it a story I am telling myself? And the moment I asked that, something inside me softened. I realized there was no problem yet. There was only a meeting, only a conversation, only information I didn't know yet. So why should I panic about something that had not happened? I decided to hold the fear gently, without letting it lead me. I whispered to myself, I will respond tomorrow. I don't need to react today. That sentence became like a small protective shield around me. I continued my day with clarity, focusing on what I could do instead of what I could imagine. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it lost its power over me. It became soft, manageable, quiet. The next morning, I woke up early. The sky was bright, the light coming softly through my window. I got ready slowly, carefully. I chose clothes that made me feel confident. I made breakfast, ate calmly, and even spent a few minutes breathing deeply before leaving the house. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't imagining the worst. I was simply preparing myself to meet the situation with a proactive mind. When I reached the office, I walked toward my manager's room with steady steps. Not too fast. Not too slow. Just present. She invited me in, and I sat across from her. Her expression was warm but thoughtful. She took a small breath before speaking. "I've been watching your growth these past few weeks," she said. "Your calmness, your way of handling problems, your attitude at work, it's very different. In a good way. And I want to give you an opportunity." I blinked. "An opportunity?" She continued, "A new project is starting next month, and we need someone who can lead a small team, someone who can stay balanced even under pressure. Someone proactive. I think that person could be you." For a moment, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, surprised. A few weeks ago, I would never have imagined this moment. I was the person who reacted to everything. The person who panicked easily. The person who felt controlled by life. And now, I was being offered leadership. Trust. Responsibility. My manager looked at me kindly, probably noticing the shock on my face. "You don't have to decide right now," she said gently. "Take your time. Think about it." I felt a warm wave of emotion rising in me, not fear, not stress, but something else. Something deeper. Pride. Gratitude. Growth. And then, in that quiet moment, I knew the answer. I didn't need time. I didn't need days or weeks. I had already decided the moment she said the word proactive. I smiled and said softly, yes. I want to do it. She nodded with satisfaction. Good. I believe you're ready. And suddenly, everything inside me changed. I felt like the person I had always wanted to become. Not perfect, not fearless, but steady, clear, confident. Someone who doesn't wait for chances but rises to meet them. Someone who doesn't run away from challenges but walks toward them with courage. Someone who knows the difference between reacting and responding. As I left her office, I walked through the hallway with a different energy. My steps felt lighter. My heart felt stronger. The world around me seemed brighter, not because the world had changed, but because I had. I finally understood the deeper secret of proactivity. When you change yourself, life begins to change with you. For many years, I thought success came from outside, from opportunities, luck, timing, or other people. But now I knew the truth. Success begins inside. In your choices, in your mindset, in your response to life, in your decision to act.